let's now get to the Standard. And joining me this morning via a video link is Mark Bichachi, joining me from home. And this, of course, is now the new way of working by use of technology. Mark, thank you for joining us and waking up early.
Most welcome. I don't know whether 7 is early, but yeah, during this quarantine, it's early.
For somebody who is not going to work, or maybe suddenly supposed to report to work by 7:30 or 8 o'clock, it might be early, all the same.
Now, imagine I still wake up at the same time. I'm up at 5:30 on the dot.
They say that the body clock, gets adjusted, and for some reason that would still continue and may continue for a while. But anyway, let's get to the dailies, and we're going to start off with the Standard, where we have the headline, Raila meeting stirs talk of new alliance. Now, this apparently is a meeting that took place at the Kotu Secretary General's house, Francis Atwoli, and looking at the number of people that were in attendance, then there could be speculation that there could be an alliance that's forming. Now, Mark Bichachi, you are a political strategist. Do you see a strategy here?
Now, of course, I do see a strategy, and the strategy is pretty simple. The strategy is after Dr. William Ruto's reaction to the changes in Jubilee, and then the rumors that the nomination of McDonald Mariga was carried out by only one part of Jubilee. Then that part of Jubilee that was disadvantaged would then, of course, look for a way of shoring up its numbers. If, for example, it is true that over 100 MPs support Ruto, then if you are on that other side of Jubilee, then you need to look for the ODM numbers, the 88 odd MPs who you would use to show up your numbers. So definitely this is a strategy being carried out. That strategy is simple. How do you do two things? Number one, how do you strengthen the president's side in parliament? And then number two, how do you make sure that in 2022 you're not caught flat-footed? Because William Ruto, we know, has been preparing for 2022 way before anyone else, and now he is basically ready to run. So what are you going to do if you are in opposition to him? And that's simply go by the old adage that says the friend of my enemy is my enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so for Murathe and team, if Ruto is against Raila, then it is very easy for Murathe to be Raila's friend.
All right, and one of the statements made, or in this particular article, apparently by the Kotu Sec Gen, and it's consistent with what he had said earlier. Remember, there was a time where he was saying that Uhuru is still very young, and where do you expect him to go? Then followed up by a statement that with this new alliance, he alleges that Uhuru will remain as part of the leadership, even if not president. What would you read into that?
Well, I think on that one, Atwoli is having a pipe dream. There is no conceivable way for Uhuru Kenyatta to remain in politics and not be president, because every other position is subservient to the presidency. No, even prime ministership. It's very hard to be a prime minister. Remember, the prime minister that has been muted by the BBI report is not a prime minister that is elected directly by parliament. It is not a prime minister that has security of tenure. So basically you'll be working at the behest of the president, and I really wonder whether you can be at the top of a ticket and then suddenly put all your chips in one hat. Secondly, anyone who's president who makes a mistake of making a former president a member of their cabinet will have made a serious mistake, and I'll tell you why. Because that person still holds the respect and the clout that the presidency used to come with. So you can imagine the conflict when you two give two conflicting instructions. Thirdly, there are too many stories of how MOUs pre-election have been trashed. So why would Uhuru Kenyatta trust his fate on an MOU, on an agreement? Lastly, how sure are you that you're going to win the numbers you need to secure the Prime Minister position in Parliament? So it's a very difficult mathematical equation to do for you to be Prime Minister based on a promise and an agreement between you and Raila Odinga, as it were. So I personally think that Uhuru Kenyatta is going to stick to his word and is going to step out of the political field. I think actually that is his dream. I have not seen anything within the Uhuru Kenyatta circle that is preparing for a second term, and if they are for a third term, and if they are, I think they're very high on something and they need to sober up pretty fast.
All right, and before we leave matters politics and go back to other things, on page 5 of the Standard, we also have Tuju now blames DP for dispute in Jubilee. And of course, there's definitely, trouble within the ruling party, Jubilee. And Uhuru Kenyatta's silence is rather loud, wouldn't you say? Given that we have some of his supporters, starting with Murathe, you have the likes of the SecGen, Raphael Tuju, who's been very vocal, but the president has been quiet. Or should we say that maybe he is speaking, albeit not using his mouth?
Well, the president has proven in the last 3 years to be the expert of political gameplay. If you see how he dealt with Kiunjuri, how he's been dealing with the mountain, how he dealt with Raila Odinga in regards to Raila Odinga declaring himself the people's president, you realize that Uhuru has been holding his cards very close to his chest, but he's not afraid to make some moves that cause ripples within the country and within his party. So it is very clear to me from what I can see that this is a very strategic move on the part of the Secretary General and the President. But further, this is again the President showing that he's above the fray. While everyone else is scampering and fighting, the President is acting above the fray, and he's so far gotten his way. If you remember, this Tanga led campaign in Kibra that failed spectacularly, you have to then give it to the side of that is, let me call it the other side, the government in government, not the government in opposition. You must give it to them that they kind of know how to play these political games. And if you want to know, they know how to play it. They let Mariga be nominated and then waited a good 4 or 5 months down the line to do what they've done now, which is basically sweep the rug from under their feet. And the reason why the Tanga Brigade is quite up in arms is simply because they did not expect it, and that is an organ where they had slowly assumed that they will not be noticed as they take it over.
All right, and well, that's Matters Politics, and it's all over the Standard, so do get yourself a copy and see what that is all about. Another very sad story that is on the front page and continues on page 2 of the Standard is the tragic end of a prolific novelist, Ken Walibora. Very, very sad news, of course, hitting the stations, and even just the manner in which he died, of course, is very, very unfortunate. Maybe just to give you an opportunity to send out your condolences, Mark.
First, my condolences to his family, his colleagues, and his massive fan base across the country. I'm one of those people who had to do his book in high school. So my deepest condolences to the country as well. But for me, what I'd like to underscore, because a friend of mine reached out to me just 3 days ago to tell me that he had also similarly been hit by a Matata in town, and he was on the pavement. He was not even on the road. And we know there's another nation employee who was similarly hit by a Matata and found days later in a morgue. I know of another story. So I know of 4 individuals, including Ken Walibora, who've been hit by matatus while walking on the pavement, and twice those matatus were either running away from the police or trying to avoid traffic jams within the CBD. I think that this is a matter that needs to be taken seriously. These are deaths that should not have happened. And you know, you keep hearing of these strange things of how someone was squeezed between matatus in town, how a matatu hit someone on the pavement. Such things should not be allowed. I think the matatu industry, it's time we really revisited the BRT, so we make sure we get rid of matatus in town, because it's like allowing corona to run rampant in the CBD, and that's a corona of the matatu industry. And matatu drivers who do such things should face the hangman's noose. That's a capital offense. That's not manslaughter. When you decide to drive on a pavement voluntarily, you should face the full brunt of the law.
Absolutely, and that's causing death by reckless driving. And of course, what is rather unfortunate is that we do have an arm of government that is supposed to take care of that. And this, of course, makes us miss the likes of Mishuki, because it seems like the transport industry literally has got their own rules, set of rules that they follow. And we don't seem to have anybody who can crack the whip to a point where, where they can take care of them. And not just the transport industry, but even private vehicle owners sometimes do ridiculous things, but we just don't have anybody to give order.
Yeah, true. There needs to be very strict enforcement of the law in as far as traffic is concerned. In fact, you do realize how life is much easier now that you have to go to work in Nairobi, now that there's less traffic. The amount of stress even in your head has reduced. And those are the things that we need to value. There is no developed country in the world that has not enforced proper rules and proper order in its roads. Kenya is the only country that hopes to develop with the kind of matatu industry and the kind of private driving that we have. That cannot be allowed to continue. And I think as a country, we need to seriously consider traffic management and traffic rules as a serious part of developing our country. We cannot develop the roads, build beautiful roads like we're building Ngong Road, how we build Thika Road, how we're building the superhighway over Mombasa, and have people who behave like barbarians, And I keep saying this, that we've talked a lot about the Kenya of 2030, the infrastructure of the 2030, but we've not talked about the citizen of 2030, because if these citizens are the same ones who will go to inherit these great roads and things like that, then the only thing we will reap is great accidents and great loss of life.
All right, and moving on now to other things. And of course, one of the areas that many Kenyans and world over have been concerned and keeping tabs on is the coronavirus COVID-19. Page 6. MPs lose 2.5 billion in new COVID-19 spending plan. And this, in a nutshell, is because they're going to lose out on their allowances, their sitting allowances, their travel allowance. Of course, travel has been reduced. And we would have expected that the members of parliament would have even come out earlier to take pay cuts. But that has not happened. Mark, your thoughts on this for our leaders?
I wrote an article concerning our members of parliament, and I said they are completely vacuous in thoughts. They have no imagination for their country, and they want the privilege to lead and not the burden to lead. They want the honor of being called Mheshimiwa without carrying the responsibility of that title. I want to put it to my fellow citizens that they should not duly, that for their parliamentarians, it was a crisis for Jubilee to change its leadership. It was not a crisis for them when COVID-19 struck this country. Most of them were quiet. In fact, one of them recently said that they would rather die to make sure Jubilee looks like the way they want, but they have said absolutely nothing about COVID-19. This is the problem of choosing entertainers and choosing jokes as leaders. One of the biggest jokes that we chose is a governor, whom I call the prison prefect, who decided that he's going to give people Hennessy and say on a media platform that Hennessy is a throat sanitizer, which is a dangerous and reckless thing to say, because can you imagine the people who follow him religiously tonight will be trying to get their hands on some Hennessy or some alcohol, thinking that it will help them beat corona. Can you imagine how dangerous that is? Two, can you imagine when you're giving out free alcohol to people who need food, who need shelter, and you've decided to give them free alcohol? What message are you sending to the young people? And I know definitely for him it is simply a campaign joke, but those are the jokes we've taken too far. This is why we've taken people whose singular profession is insulting people, whose single expertise is throwing mud at the other side. That is why the only time they can come out to speak is when it's a matter political. But when it's a matter national interest, when it's a matter of national importance, they do not have a thing to contribute to the betterment of our country.
Mark, we have complained, and we continue to complain as Kenyans about our leaders, but the more things change, the more they remain the same. What do you think is going to be the tipping point? I mean, we've seen jokes that are laughable to others, but they're not laughable to us because, like you mentioned, we have a crisis in Nairobi County even before COVID-19 by virtue of the fact we have a governor who could not work with his assistant. Things are literally a mess. But what will be the tipping point? What will change the quality of our leaders and how we choose our leaders?
Well, it will only change when people vote with expectation. One of the things that I've come to realize is that our people do not vote with any form of expectation at all. Our people vote simply because of popularism and excitement, which is why across the world there is no other country where if you ask what our slogans are, you will hear Wembe ni ule ule, you will scare Tibim Tialala, you will hear Kumira Kumira, all of which are slogans that mean nothing. Yeah, so when we hear that and we keep voting for these people, think of the people who voted for Waititu. What was their expectation when they queued? What was their expectation? And that lack of expectation, that euphoria voting, is what is biting us. Look at the people, for example, who voted for Babu Owino. Which of us was surprised when we saw that video of him pulling a gun casually? It is because he has casually caused strikes before. He's casually rattled this nation before. But we keep voting for people because we have no expectation. Even some people today, and I did some poll on Facebook and I asked, okay, some of you have candidates for 2022, tell me what they will change in this country. And they told me, oh, I just like him, or he's a hustler like me, or he comes from the same village as me, or he speaks Swahili from the coast like me, or he's the Sultan of the coast. Simple, very, very archaic and ridiculous, and I dare say foolish ideology among the voters. Until we change our minds, until we want results. In fact, I like what someone told me the other day, that he will line up to employ. Yeah, and that's the thing, because when you're employing someone, you're giving them a job to do. So until we change that paradigm, nothing's going to change.
Going to change. All right, still on coronavirus, page 7 of the Standard. Lockdown looms as cases hit 225. And there's also been the debate, Mark, and maybe just to hear what your thoughts are, that the sooner we lock down, the sooner we can expect to get back to normal. Because, I mean, I have witnessed a few days that I've been out that at 5 o'clock, traffic is as usual. It looks like, yes, the Ministry of Health is coming out to say that we need to stop this, flatten the curve. But by looking at how people are behaving, unless it is enforced, then it looks like we continue with business as usual. I'm not sure we've got the full gravitas of what we are face to face with when it comes to COVID-19.
Not at all, not at all. I put on my mask and I drove around the areas of Kikuyu and things like that over the weekend just to see what is going on. And I'm telling you, I saw people meeting in parks. I saw people meeting in any open space they could find. I did not see social distancing. I did not see, I think only about 30% of the people I saw were wearing masks. And when you see that, you realize that for a lot of people, either they are assuming that this disease is for people who have traveled because they've seen in the news so and so travel, so and so travel. They've forgotten that there are a lot of local transmissions. They've totally forgotten that. But now what is happening is, for a lot of people, they have not realized or even recognized that this thing is dangerous, that this thing is real. I think it's still very ethereal for them. And I think what needs to happen, and I don't know how this can be done, is they need to be shown Kenyans who are in the ICU because of COVID-19. I think when Brenda came out and she looked bubbly and she said it's just like the flu, a lot of people think it's like that for everyone, but that's not true. There are a lot of people who, when they catch this thing, they have very severe symptoms, and that's who they need to see.
What are your thoughts on locking down, literally locking down the country?
Well, I am a bit apprehensive about that. We do not have the social safety net to be able to pull it off. I honestly do not think so. Let me tell you why. Right now, we will say that you need to give food aid to the people in Kibra, in Mathare, and other poorer sides of the city. That's not necessarily just gonna be it. You're going to have to deal with a lot of people who live in Buruburu, who live in Langata, who live in Kileleshwa, who live from paycheck to paycheck, and they've been laid off, and they will not have money to buy food. And that's nearly going to be 1.something million people in Nairobi who are in need of food aid. Then you've got to look at the indiscipline that Kenyans have in general, and you ask yourself how many Kenyans will sit in their house. And then if they don't sit in their house, what does the government do? Because I would not recommend sending people to jail, because imagine you're trying to fight COVID, then you put 10 people in this 3 meter by 3 meter cubicle. So at the end of the day, unless we want to put our troops and spend our entire budget on feeding our population, I do not think Kenya can afford a lockdown. Does it need it? I think we do, but I don't think we can afford it.
All right, and I want us to wind up or look at the Daily Nation. The headline is IMF sees bright future for Kenya after virus gloom. And although coronavirus is bound to sink the economy this year, according to IMF, the global agency predicts that we will rebound by 6.1% next year. Do you feel like this is honest?
I think it is honest, just simply because I have been studying the Kenyan trading patterns. And one of the things that Kenya has is that a lot of our industries can easily pick up after COVID. If you look at tourism, if you look at our tea sector, you look at coffee, you look at flowers, you look at all of those things, there is none that people can say these are not goods that they consume every day. And since they still will continue to consume tea, still want to go on holiday, and then let's not forget the biggest resource, the Kenyan human capital. This is the thing that we must commend Kenyans for. You know, every Kenyan has a job and a side hustle, and most Kenyans are willing to work, and that work ethic is what is going to give us our bounce back. And if you look at the history, if you look at 1992, if you look at 1997, if you look at 2007, if you look at 2001, 2002, every time we've had an economic dip, the people of Kenya have gone right back to work. And actually the next year we've registered huge growth. If you look at the years after 2007, I think the time we registered the highest percentage GDP growth was soon after the post-election violence. So one of the things the Kenyan people can do, and we must commend our people for that, is they can bounce back after they've been hit hard. And I'm sure even those who are living at home are planning, they're thinking, they're doing online business. I've seen online business shoot through the roof. They've found ways to do deliveries. So the Kenyan spirit is another thing that assures me that we will bounce back just fine. But let me just just say this. Isn't it funny that our politicians were saying our economy is bad, it is bad, it is bad, it is bad? Now Kenyans know what a bad economy is, and so strangely, when our economy is bad, the same politicians who were saying something needs to be done have no ideas at all to give us when it comes to how to fix our economy.
And that, of course, leaves us with the question of what quality of leaders do we have, or should we even be calling them leaders? Because leaders really are supposed to be visionary and have foresight, which doesn't seem to be the case. And one of those things that maybe I've had economists talk about is ensuring that we become more of a producing country than importing country. Do you think that is one of the things that would really help us boost our economy, such that if I have to wear a suit, then I'm buying it from a Kenyan? Hopefully the material has been made in Kenya, and that way we're able to keep the economy running.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, I wrote an article and I'm so excited about the industries that are coming up. You know, there's a clothing manufacturer in Nakuru who's just gotten nearly 1,000 Kenyans back to work to produce masks that are surgical mask level, and that's employment during COVID. There's other companies that are working on the PPE materials. There's a lot of industries and a lot of good news that is coming out, and I can tell you that for a fact that one of the things that we need to emphasize moving forward is buy Kenyan, build Kenyan, and Kenya needs to come up with a list of essential products which we must produce for ourselves. Because guess what? India is closed, China is closed. Now Kenya has to start producing those things. And finally, we need to convert our industrial area complexes from being warehouses of storing Chinese products to going back to being factories to produce things that Kenyans need. So right now is the time to get into any industry, because guess what? If we can't get it from China, we need to get it from Kenya. But then also that opens up the opportunity for Kenya to provide the same to Uganda, to Tanzania, to Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Mark Bichachi. We'll have to wind it up right there. Thank you for joining us this morning on Newspaper Review, joining us via video.